Alright, so right now Nintendo is in their new golden age as a company where they dominated with the Nintendo Switch 2, selling 19 million units so far and making $15 billion in under 1 year. But they did have some bumpy roads as a company, especially trying to break into the handheld console market with this dud right here, the Wii U, which was a colossal failure that cost the company over $1 billion. But I'm just wondering why after the success of the Wii, this thing failed so bad. And looking at the failure of the Wii U, we have to realize Nintendo in the 2000s wasn't actually in a good spot when it came to the console market because the Nintendo 64 and the GameCube both undersold, where the Nintendo 64 only sold 33 million units, and then the GameCube did even worse, selling just 23 million. The reason the 64 and the GameCube just didn't do so well is Nintendo really couldn't compete with Sony with the PlayStation 2, where it was at a good price and also at the same time had way better technology, and that's why the PS2 sold 160 million units, which was more than double what the GameCube and the Nintendo 64 sold combined. Nintendo's fears got a lot worse in 2004 when Sony announced they'd be introducing the PSP, which a lot of analysts predicted would wipe out the Game Boy. For a while, Game Boy was basically what was keeping Nintendo in business because they were able to sell 200 million versions of the Game Boy, be it the original one or the SP, and because of that, they actually made about $50 billion off the game selling them, but yeah, they were afraid of Sony. 2004, when Nintendo announced that their new product would be getting rid of the Game Boy to make the Nintendo DS, a lot of people actually thought this was going to fail compared to the PSP because the screens were a lot smaller, the technology wasn't as good, and people were saying, yeah, this is going to fail, Sony's going to own handhelds. But those analysts were wrong, where the PSP actually was considered kind of a dud, where even though it sold 80 million units, it took them 10 years to get there, and at the same time, the DS actually more than doubled those sales with 170 million units sold, and they also sold a lot more games. The reason the DS won was because it was cheaper, it didn't rely on CDs, so it didn't have the overheating effect of the PSP, and also the biggest thing was kids really liked the novelty of the stylus, which helped the gameplay. And that was the mindset that got Nintendo back into the console game, where they had this massive hit with the Wii, which sold 103 million units, outselling the PS3 and the Xbox 360, with the goal being to have a cheaper console that was more innovative with the controller, and because of that, they had this colossal hit. So because of that, Nintendo had this massive confidence that they were going to continue to own the console market, but then 6 years later, they get a dud introducing the Wii U to the market. And they thought this would be a massive success, but it ended up being their lowest performing console outside of the Virtual Boy, selling only 9 million units. A lot of reasons for the failure, with the first being Nintendo did all these extension products to the original Wii, like the Wii U, which sold 40 million units. So because of other products like the Wii Fit, a lot of people thought the Wii U was just an extension to the Wii where they were adding a tablet to it, and it didn't really carry that much interest because there were so many other great products out there like the iPad. The other issue with the Wii U is Nintendo was competing with itself, where they already introduced the 3DS 6 months earlier, and that was dominating the handheld market, so the point of the Wii U was kind of minimal. And then there's also the issue of price, because this was ultimately priced more like a console versus a handheld, so people were opting for the cheaper DSs because you can get one for every kid, versus the Wii U, where kids would have to share a handheld and that would never work. So it flopped, but the good news, Nintendo clearly learned their lesson with the Switch, which was meant to be this clear sequel to both the DS and the Wii, and they had a massive hit. And with that, I'm Charles Pearl. Subscribe to learn something.